Welcome, everybody. We are here from Pasadena, California. It's not that sunny, but pretty nice day. We're here with Buckys Fifth Quarter. My name is Louis Bien. Next to me is Nick Korger. He writes for Buckys Fifth Quarter, also here reporting with the Badger Herald. There's the camera. Very dapper dressed young man. I am not looking so good, but he has press duties, so...
I got to make myself presentable for another organization. So, I mean, you're lucky enough you get to go as watch as a fan. You know, this is the first time I've been here since 2010 when the Badgers lost to TCU in a heartbreaker. Obviously, here in Pasadena, the Badgers would like to repeat some of the success that they've had under Barry Alvarez. So, really, in this game, I think it comes down to, will the Badgers be any different without Brett Bielema? You know, this is a program that really has suffered some upturn and some upheaval with all the assistant coaches reportedly leaving besides Ben Strickland and Thomas Hammock. So really, is this an open audition for a guy like Bart Miller, their offensive line coach, for the tight ends job? You know, you got another set of coaches from Utah State and Gary Anderson, basically open auditions for their players evaluating talent. But Stanford, I mean, what can be said about this group?
They are really freaking good. That's as much as I can say. You know, I'm really going in this game. I'm pretty nervous because I really do think Stanford is, the way they ended the season, I think they're playing as well as anybody in the country right now. Really, Stanford reminds me a lot of the last two Badger teams that went to the Rose Bowl. You know, teams that probably have national title aspirations, suffered, you know, middle of the season losses, tough losses. You know, Stanford probably should have beat Notre Dame. You know, I think they're going to be a very tough out for the Badgers.
No, absolutely. I think when you look at almost the mirror image of the Badgers and the Stanford opponent, you really look at two dynamic tight ends that Stanford has that have gotten to this point of the season. You got a guy like Toilolo, and everyone's talking about Zach Ertz. Yeah. I mean, what can be said about a guy who's 6'6", can split himself out in the slot and run against anyone in man-to-man coverage? He has extreme success. And now when you got a guy like Kevin Hogan making just his fifth start, he's 4-0. He's beat 4 ranked teams. And for a guy like him who's still young and developing, the tight ends serve as a great safety valve, and you know that they're going to get both these guys involved early.
Right. Let's talk about Kevin Hogan. You watched a ton of film on Stanford. Can you describe like his skill set, his running ability, his passing ability? Is there any weakness in his game?
Absolutely. When you have a young quarterback, one of the first things you look at is, can you rattle him early? Can you get him shaken up? And this is the biggest environment he's ever played in his life. But from what I've seen, what's so impressive about him and what has guys like Coach Shaw from Stanford raving is the fact that you got a guy that just doesn't get rattled. He's played in the big environments. He started at Eugene in Oregon, beat Oregon on the road to even get to this point, and he takes and steps up in pressure. He doesn't run away. He doesn't get rattled very, very easy. And from what I've seen, really, his skill set, it's complete. He can run the ball. He's a very, very good athlete. They like to run a little bit of the read option with him now, which sort of takes away a little bit of your defense that's slower for Wisconsin. And, man, can he throw a precision strike. Long ball, he's not very good, and he does have the young mistake to try to force some passes, and that's what the Badgers are going to have to hope for.
I think he's completed something like 73% of his passes the last 4 games.
Unbelievable.
The teams he's played, Oregon, Oregon State, UCLA twice, all ranked teams. Slowing down Kevin Hogan is really going to be the key. We talked a little bit about this in, when we were getting warmed up. How do the Badgers defend a guy like that? Like, do they bring a heavy blitz on him? We haven't really seen that from the Badgers, but is that something that they might adjust to in this game?
Exactly. And I think what you saw the Badgers do with Taylor Martinez is a little bit of what you'll do. Now, you don't have the same speed to say, but you have to keep an outside contain on your rush. You can't allow him to get outside because he can extend a play, and the plays that he's had the most success are the ones where he's been able to extend the play outside of the pocket. Mm-hmm. You look at guys like Brett Favre, Tony Romo, it's almost that same style. They can throw just as well on the run as they can from the pocket, and that's what makes him so dangerous. So Wisconsin's definitely going to have to send some blitzes, hope to get to him, but Stanford offensive line, they're not really giving up too much. They're anchored by a guy like David Yankee, the Morris Trophy winner. Mm-hmm. It's a tough task, and that's something I've been trying to figure out how the Badgers are going to attack, and I'm definitely interested to see how Coach Ashton Partridge attack.
Yeah, I mean, you saw what they did in the Big Ten championship game. They brought out the Indy package where they created a lot of confusion in the middle, put only 2 defensive linemen down, 2 defensive ends down, and it's my sister. And they really, they created a lot of confusion for Taylor Martinez. what more can they do on defense, really?
You just really have to hope that they can contain the run. I mean,
Yeah.
and Stephon Taylor is by no means any worse than Monte Ball. He's absolutely terrific. And with that front five, and you got guys that are the size of Ertz and Toilolo, I mean, they'll just bruise you up front.
Yeah.
I mean, this game is going to be smash mouth football at its finest, really old school football, really
Totally. This is like
punching each other in the mouth. I mean, who flinches first in this game?
It's going to be a lot of fun. Stephon Taylor, I mean, he really is in the mold of a Monte Ball. You know, it's the same runner, same all-around solid skill set. You know, yeah. I mean, Stanford's an interesting team to me, especially since they're almost. We talked about this too. I mean, they're almost more Big Ten than any other Big Ten team. You know, I mean, two of their top receivers are tight ends. I think their fullbacks, their fourth leading receiver. Wisconsin. It's a team Wisconsin's seen a lot, and I think that helps. I mean, they're used to playing that game, but at the same time, it's almost like they exert their will on a lot of teams. So, I think Wisconsin's going to have to be better on a man-to-man basis. I don't know if they can out-scheme them on defense. They're going to be the tougher team.
Well, absolutely, and it's a big change too when you look at it from the fact that Nebraska's a spread team. Don't make any mistake; they're a team that can have success on the ground, running up the middle. Yeah. But Stanford's bread and butter is just right between the tackles. They really don't have to do anything fancy. You're looking at just really an old-school pro attack of just destroying it on the ground, play action, a lot of what Wisconsin wants to do, and that's what makes them a mirror image. Now, I think the big thing in this game is how different is this team going to be with Barry Alvarez?
That's a really important question. I really like what their team has said, like media day interviews, what Barry Alvarez has said in interviews. I mean, it sounds like an energized team, It sounds like there is a different mindset going in this game, almost like a nothing to lose kind of mentality. Because, they've been through so much. They're sort of like, screw mode. We lost our coach. Monte Ball's a senior. He's going out. They've lost 2 in a row. I mean, I really feel like, this is business for them. They're just going to...
Yeah. 5, all you hear about is, does this team deserve to be here?
Yeah.
5 losses. And those kids are sick of hearing it. How often do they hear it during the season that this team does not deserve to be here? And that's just added motivation from all the things they've gone through.
I think so.
You just hope that they respond in the appropriate way.
And in some sense, they don't deserve to be there. I mean, they lost 5 games. Penn State and Ohio State were both,
it is what
seasons.
It is, right.
But, I mean, even that's motivation. I mean, in the sense that, this is it's almost like a free pass. Do what the hell you want. Canada's going out. Ash is going out. I think you're going to see a lot of fun things on both sides of the ball.
Exactly, and that's something that the creative play calling is something we're really stressing in this game. We saw what the playbook looked like completely emptied against Nebraska.
Yeah.
Now you throw the entire kitchen instead of just the kitchen sink in this game. Yeah. I've heard about all 3 running backs being on the field at the same time. I've heard of Chris Borland being in on offense. You hear all these stories. Matt Canada's just in his last game at Wisconsin wants to leave it all out on the field, and I'm sure we're going to see something that we haven't seen at all this season. Jared Aberderis, the wide receiver, used to play quarterback in high school. He was pretty good, so maybe we'll see a little end-around pass.
Chris Borland on offense, I really like to see that.
Yeah.
Suplexing across the end zone. Yeah.
You need more for talk?
What's that?
Yeah, well, I'm interested to see, especially offensively for Wisconsin, how do you match up against the front 7 of the Stanford defense? I mean, Anderson and Gardner, 2 huge defensive ends.
You look at the numbers, 56 sacks. It's just like an astronomical figure.
How do you do that when you're only rushing 4 guys?
And that's the thing, is that they don't blitz. And it's, you look at that and you're just like, They're very strong, and obviously they have a very strong rush defense. If you look at how Wisconsin matches up against Stanford, Wisconsin is the perfect matchup for Stanford. And in that sense, it's not good. But then you think about what Wisconsin did in that Big Ten championship game, and you're like, well, maybe there's a chance that they'll just be able to do it against anybody.
Yeah, they're 6.5-point underdogs. What do you make of that? I think that says something with a team that has 5 losses that they're only favored by that much. And Stanford, you know what they're going to try to do. They're going to try to make Wisconsin break. And that's something Wisconsin has done late in games. And that's what's so scary. You think of the Michigan State game, you think of the Ohio State game, games where the Badgers were winning almost the entire time. You get to overtime, you get to crunch time, and somehow the Badgers found a way to lose rather than to win. And that's when the coaching comes in. In so many close games, Coaching makes the difference like that. And with Bielema gone and Alvarez in and a lot more control of the assistant coordinators. I mean, we were talking about earlier in the broadcast about how we heard the story from the Wisconsin State Journal written by Tom Mulhern about how there's a clash between offensive coordinator Matt Canada and Brett Bielema this season.
Yeah, I mean, you really saw, you kind of had a sense that there was something going on. I mean, at least that's what it felt like to me. I mean, you saw, it was like the first drives of the Ohio State game, Penn State game, you saw a lot of creativity, you saw the jet sweep, and you saw Wisconsin get away from it in the second half. The first Nebraska game, case in point, that's the second half play calling was just almost completely different from the first half. There almost had to be something going on in the background. Bielema's gone, Canada's last game, Barry Alvarez's last game. I don't know. I think he really is.
You know, Barry Alvarez has a little bit of an ego, and he's happy to be back in the big games. You know, who doesn't want to coach in the big game? Like he always brings up. You know, this is the only time that an interim head coach has been in the Rose Bowl. Who makes it to the granddaddy of them all and then leaves the team? I think that says just about how strange of a season it's been in 2012 for Wisconsin. You talk about losing your offense, your offensive line coach 2 games in the year because of underperformance, starting 3 quarterbacks, losing the one you were sent on to injury, Monte Ball, all this stuff in the offseason. There's so many things have gone wrong in the season. Then finally, when something actually happened for once in the blowout of Nebraska, you lose your head coach.
3 days later.
The biggest news of the season, and you're going into your biggest game still. It seems like this roller coaster will never end, and then you have all the stories about the replacement coaches, the new assistant coaches. It's honestly like it's been a marathon, especially for me as a journalist to cover. I can tell you what, I really am happy I've gotten some sleep over this holiday break because I know once I get back to school, it's going to be a lot to report on again.
So you've talked a lot to the players. You've talked to the coaches. You've talked to David Shaw. You've talked to Stanford players. Do you sense a difference in mentality between Stanford players and Wisconsin players?
Absolutely not.
Yeah.
They are the same. They're tough-minded kids, and that's the way Shaw recruits, and that's the same way that Bielema recruited. You have these 2 group of young men who are just so smart, but between the shoulders, these kids are smart that go to Stanford. Obviously, Wisconsin too, and they both have the utmost respect for each other. You don't hear any of the trash talk about, oh, this is a 5-loss team, we deserve better, although that's what you'll hear fans say. But these Stanford players have the utmost respect. They've seen on film how close Wisconsin has been to maybe a 1 or 2 loss season, and that's just what makes this game so great. 2 absolutely prestigious universities on top of that, and they show that you can have academic and athletic success. Yeah. And that's what you have to that's really undervalued too, I think. It's just how very classy both these teams have been. Just talking to both of them, very well spoken, and some fireworks going on. Man, it's the granddaddy of them all. Why not? Now a car alarm too. There's always something going on.
This is going beautifully.
You see, I'm not sure if that was actually supposed to happen. I don't remember that in 2010.
I don't remember that in 2010. I don't remember that in 2011.
Wow.
You said it. So I really like these 2 programs. I really do think they're very mirror images of each other. Stanford is a Big Ten team playing in the country.
I love Stanford. I've met so many of these fans. These fans are great. Just really too well. And Stanford outsold Wisconsin by about 20,000 tickets. So this is really an away game for Wisconsin. I mean, it's only a 6-hour drive from the Stanford campus here. Right. And Wisconsin's played in hostile environments before. They were actually the away team too for the Big Ten championship game. Nebraska was way better represented than Wisconsin too. So they talk about how they love this underdog role, and that's what they're getting right now. You talk to this team, they know they're their underdog. They know they're expected to play poorly by a lot of people in the media. You have a guy like Kirk Herbstreit out here talking about how Wisconsin doesn't deserve to be here. I mean, and that's why he doesn't think they're going to win. But I'll tell you what, Lee Corso hit the nail on the head. It's just that extra motivation that, this fairy tale setup for Wisconsin, that the perfect icing on the cake would be if this is the year to finally win a Rose Bowl. Why not have it be 2013?
The weirdest season ever. I think if you look at the batters objectively, we can't necessarily look at it objectively because we're definitely big fans, but 5 losses by combined 19 points. They improved throughout the season. Obviously, for the first 4 games, you can't ignore them, but that was a completely different team. The offensive line gelled. And they're playing their best football right now, and I really do think they're a better team. And I think the way Stanford plays, I don't think it can even be a blowout anyway. I think, you talk about having a puncher's chance. I think Wisconsin's going to be within a touchdown, and within a touchdown is, one play away from winning the game.
Well, you touch on the growth of the offensive line. Something that's been so impressive is just how they have gotten better from game to game to game under Bart Miller, who's just 27 years old, elevated after that Markson firing from his role as an offensive quality control coach. And really, he had some familiarity working with Bob Bosa and playing under Bob Bosa for a couple of years at New Mexico. Wisconsin went back to that old-school downhill blocking style of football, and with a month to prepare, that this team has just gotten better. And you just hope that they're able somehow to handle that front seven, because Stanford's going to be going hard in that 3-4 in the blitz packaging.
So who should we look at in Stanford's front seven? Like, where does their pressure come from, and what do they do?
I can't pick out anyone. Chase Thomas is the guy everyone talks about in the middle, but you look at every single one of those linebackers, and all three of the guys they rotate in. We talked about it earlier. Stanford's not 7 deep. They're not 10 deep. They're 14 deep. They rotate a ton of kids in. They can stay, they can stay fresh, and that's something that Oregon really tried to avoid too. And the game that I thought was the closest for Stanford was the fact that Oregon was able, with that spread option, to keep that rotation off the field. Yeah. But when we come to the similar pro-style attack that Wisconsin has versus Stanford, they're really going to use that, just like Wisconsin does too. So I really can't point out to anyone. I know, Skov, that other inside linebacker, who's just a sophomore. Teams have really picked on him with tight end routes, but he's played outstanding. You're talking about a group of 7 of those guys, probably 5 of them won some sort of Pac-12 honors. There's really no one I can point to. That entire group is solid. I
mean, that's the thing, is that, you look at their tackle for loss numbers, and there are 7, 8, 9, 10 guys that have double-digit TFL numbers, and it's unbelievable. Like, they get production from everywhere.
And it's just, the fact is there hasn't been any drop-off. They've been consistent this season, and they just continue to get better. And that's what scares you if you're Wisconsin, the fact that your offensive line has struggled against better talent. You think of Michigan State, the way they just destroyed Wisconsin, only 19 total rushing yards in that game. Then you go back to maybe Nebraska, who had a terrific defense the first meeting of the year, 56 yards, and then what Jordan Hill did with Penn State against Wisconsin, just single-handedly beat Wisconsin. So with the level of talent that's across the board, this is the best defense, hands down, the Badgers have seen this season.
I think that's 100% right. But I do think, they rushed the passer very well. One stat I found somewhat interesting was the fact that, they had I don't know where their rushing defense ranked, but it was a top 10. But if you take out sack yardage, they give up something like 4.4 yards per carry. I do think there's a chance that we'll be able to rush up and tackle, and I think it's almost pointless to say at this point, because it's been true for Wisconsin football for years now. But how they run the football is really going to determine how the game goes.
That's
a
great
third and long
point.
is going to be killer for the Badgers.
Oh, for sure, and you hope they don't get in third and long because of how poorly they've executed this season. I just did that film study on Bucky's fifth quarter for any of our good-looking readers out there. I'd say I know, wearing the suit, it just sort of goes. But, I talked about how every team that's had success against Stanford in the ground has had success between the tackles after they've established the outside edge. The weakness of Stanford isn't their safeties, it's their quarterbacks. They're not a very great group. To be honest with you, I can probably say this is the first time I'd say Wisconsin has a better group of corners in this game.
Yeah.
And the way Wisconsin's receivers have been blocking all year under Coach Zach Azzani has really been underrated. We talked about in the Nebraska game, Jared Aberdarius maintained blocks on those jet sweeps from Melvin Gordon 40 yards down the field. You never see that anymore.
Right.
And if they can do that, if they can set the edge all game, that's where you have to have some of that middle outside linebacker safety help switch out, and that frees up the inside. So if Wisconsin does want to have success on the ground like you touched on, they have to have success early on the outside edge with Melvin Gordon and that jet sweep.
And if they don't get there, they're in big trouble. Wisconsin has not, frankly, pass blocked that well this season. I think they're something like 75th in sacks given up. In terms of sack percentage, they're the 10th worst team in the country.
Right, yeah.
So the pass blocking simply hasn't been there. 3rd and 10, 2nd and 10, or 2nd and 8 it's going to be big trouble for Wisconsin.
You just hope that Kurt Phillips isn't the one who has to make plays, and that's the biggest thing in this game.
That's Phillips, the unknown.
In the 2 games that Wisconsin has won with him starting, he has thrown under 10 times in each game.
Yeah.
In the 2 games Wisconsin has lost, over 25 times in both games.
Yeah.
If that doesn't tell you something about the vitality of Wisconsin's ground game to the success of this program, I don't know what does.
Yeah, well, absolutely. And, what we've seen, he went 6 for 8 passing in the Big Ten championship game, but we haven't seen him have to put the ball, put the game on his shoulders.
He hasn't had to make plays since that Penn State game where he drove them back in the 2-minute drill like he
Yeah.
did against Ohio State. And he's shown, Kurt Phillips is a guy who is universally respected by every player and every coach in the program, and that's what makes him this great leader that they've been looking for. I mean, he was the ideal guy, really the only guy to take over for Stavi, but he took it and he ran with it. I mean, these kids respect the fact he's came back from 3 ACL surgeries, 2 ACL tears. Maybe he's not the same athlete that was that 4-star recruit coming out of Tennessee.
That was unbelievable.
He just keeps doing what he does.
Yeah.
And that's all you can ask for. He leads. He's a great game manager. He's not going to kill you with mistakes.
Yeah.
It'll be interesting to see how he plays in this game. And you talk about that. Why don't you talk about a little bit about Joel Stavi being cleared to play?
I don't know. I mean, how do you use him in a game like this? My feeling on this, I'm kind of a sentimental guy. I kind of want to see Phillips get the reins and just hold on to it. Fifth-year senior. I like the story. It's an all-out kind of game. I personally just don't feel good switching quarterbacks.
Yeah, absolutely. But the only problem in this game is just with how well Stanford's run defense is. If you have to make passes downfield, Stave has that cannon.
True.
I mean, not only does he have those the golden locks that everyone always talks about, but you talk about a cannon of an arm. Staying around 6'5", 6'6". Aberderis has his success just dropped astronomically since Kurt Phillips stayed, because when you got a guy who can't pass that well, it really limits your playbook options, and Aberderis has suffered because of that. And that's another guy too who could be an impact player in this game. Can they get the ball to their best playmaker in open space? That's in the wide receiver court.
Yeah. So with Stave, what would you do? Would you try to work him in early in? Would you try to work packages in for him, or would you?
Yeah, you know what? I think actually you're going to see some of the packages in this game. They talked about it during the week that you'll see him on a couple series. I'm also thinking as well, if Kurt Phillips really struggles after the first quarter, the second quarter, and they're getting beaten pretty bad, you don't have any choice but to switch to Stavi.
Yeah.
And because the fact is you've gotten this far, you can't hold anything back. You have to do what it takes to win. Right. And Kurt Phillips is the ultimate team player. He's a program guy. He'd have no problem if he's playing poorly, stepping out, I think.
Yeah. Let's talk about Monte Ball. What do you make of his season? What do you make of his career, and what do you make of him for this game?
You know what? I think it's tough when you talk. I think he might be one of the best Badgers of all time. I wouldn't be surprised.
I agree 100%.
I wouldn't be surprised.
I wrote a long feature on Buckys today.
If we don't see number 28's jersey retired. He might be better than Ron Zane only from the fact of what he's been able to do in his career. The character that he needed and he had to respond to the adversity he faced all season, and the success he's had year in and year out. Now that's what defines a superstar, is a guy when teams try to figure out different ways to stop you year from year, and you still have that same success. Monte's a superstar. He's the greatest representation of UW in my lifetime as a student, and man, what a football player.
My favorite thing about him is how he has consistently every year tried to evolve himself. He lost weight going into his sophomore year. He put weight back on in his junior year. I mean, he's just a consummate hard worker. And he's just everything he's had, he's deserved. He was a 4-star coming out of high school, but he was a low 4-star, not super highly. He was supposed to be one in a long line of Badger running backs, not like the superstar he is.
Yeah.
And it's been incredible to watch. I can't bet against him anymore. I don't know if Wisconsin's going to win today, but I think he can have success today.
Yeah, I think he can too. And you know what? All of his yards this season have been yards after first contact. Yeah. Because the way the offensive line is played,
so balanced.
Replacing 3 starters, they were so awful at the beginning of the year. He's getting frustrated. And the fact that he never said anything about it too, it just speaks volumes about the kid as an athlete.
Yeah.
And that's the thing too in this game is, will he still be that same guy who's plowing guys over in this game, or will Stanford just beat him down? Because I've seen some of the hits this defense puts on. It's not pretty. I've seen guys like Jonathan Franklin from UCLA. It's pretty nasty what they'll do to you.
Yeah. And Melvin Gore and James White too. Fun stat. I think in Wisconsin's 5 losses, Melvin Gore and James White have averaged a combined 16 yards in their 8 wins, over 160. How important is their success to Wisconsin today?
Well, if you want to keep your running backs fresh in a game, the only thing you have to do is rotate. And the fact is you have a 3-headed monster, like in 2010 at TCU, the last time they were here with John Clay, James White, and Monte Ball. You have that same element, and all the guys are different changes of pace. Melvin Gordon's a speed guy. James White's a complete number 2. He's a scat back. He's really electric in his cuts. You got a complete running back like Monte Ball who will just bruise you and destroy you with his physical style of running. And it's important that you use the other two guys because they keep defenses off balance and they don't allow them to key on the run between the tackles. You know that outside edge. And even using the jet sweep as just, a fake, that makes the defense stop. And if Wisconsin wants to have that success against Stanford, Matt Canada did a great job, you remember, in the beginning of that Nebraska game, mixing up initial formations in different sets.
Yeah. I mean, it's going to be... I love what Wisconsin did during that Big Ten championship game. The one thing that has me worried about its success is how well Stanford did against Oregon this year. That was the one team that they faced really attacking
Oregon's
the edge.
Great too. I mean, you talk about
Awesome
a terrific team.
Yeah, and I think they had like 198 yards rushing, which for Oregon is not that much.
Nothing. Yeah, absolutely nothing.
And and to see Stanford defend that, I'm a little worried.
Yeah, that's definitely one of the scariest things. You look at the way how they were able to adjust in the second half to some of those outside runs. That Coach Shaw, he's a great guy. He'll make great adjustments. There's some NFL jobs I know that'll be waiting for him in a couple of years just because of the success he's had. You look at the quality of opponents they've played. The Pac-12 really had an upswing this year, I think. A team that obviously, beat USC. Stanford was neck to neck with Notre Dame. They had a terrific schedule. The Badgers played some good teams, but not like Stanford, and that's where that confidence comes from. You worry about Stanford's played with the best, and they've beaten the best. Yeah. Wisconsin, what's the best win you can say this program has had this season besides the Big Ten championship game?
Utah State.
Wait, Utah, yeah.
Game they should have lost.
Who would have known that would have been one of the better games this year? The non-conference schedule. They always talk about how weak it is at Wisconsin. Would have known that would have produced two ranked opponents.
Luckily, yeah.
Yeah.
There's no way they expected that. I think Utah State was, in any case, got a new head coach from there. So you were telling me before the game, on this broadcast, we talked about how good Stanford is, but you think Wisconsin's going to blow them out? Yeah,
I do, and I'll tell you the only reason why I think Wisconsin's going to blow Stanford out is in a season where everything goes wrong. It's only a matter of time until something goes emphatically right. Yeah. The Nebraska game, I think, was the breaking of the dam. Now, it's not going to be a 70-31 blowout in my mind, because a game can go two ways in this one. Yeah. Wisconsin beats them pretty bad, or Stanford wins a close one, because that's how it's been all season. Yeah. And Wisconsin, the key thing is to beating Stanford in the two games they lost is jumping out on them early. You have to find a way to step on them early. And I think with Matt Canada, without Brett Bielema micromanaging, because no offense to Brett Bielema, but he was an awful game manager. Yeah, he was a great recruiter. There's a bunch of good things he did for the university.
Awesome, but 6 days a week.
Yeah, and just when it came to the day it mattered most, he couldn't produce.
Yeah.
So you wonder, with all these assistants freed up, what we're going to see. And I think that's what I'm looking forward to the most, is seeing if the offense will be even more creative. How many more trick plays can we see, man? I love that pass from James White out of the barge formation. That's the fun stuff that keeps fans interested.
I almost see it like a rock, paper, scissors match, I think man for man, Wisconsin's offense versus Stanford's defense, I think Stanford's defense has a slight edge.
Yeah.
Maybe not even slight. That front seven has just been phenomenal. But I do think Matt Canada has the creativity to really pull out something. I don't know what. We'll see.
No,
I didn't know what was going to happen in the Nebraska game when we saw it. Really, I think trick plays, craziness, it's going to be awesome.
I'm sort of sad, too, to see that Matt Canada's not going to be able to stick around for another season. Now, who would have known about all this stuff going on behind the scenes that we didn't get to see? And then for that creativity, and the creativity in the play calling, would have known the real Matt Canada we'd probably seen these last two games of the season here, and that's the saddest part.
And that's something he said, and that's something I think that limited himself, is that he knew he was coming to Wisconsin. He knew there was this pro-style system. He ran a spread in Northern Illinois. But I think at first, too, I don't want to blame all Brett Bielema. I think Matt Canada limited himself a bit because he wanted to fit with what Paul Chris did.
That is a terrific point, because that was actually brought up by Matt Canada in an interview this week. He was limiting himself. Just because he felt this was Wisconsin, we have to do this ground and pound idea. But the fact is, when your weakness is the offensive line compared to other years, you have to adjust, and he's done a great job adjusting since then.
Yeah.
We got to wrap it up. Yeah. Well,
wrap it up. Well, prediction. What you said?
I'm going to guess, to be honest, I'm going to go 35-13 in this game. I just see Wisconsin's newfound confidence, the momentum from the Big Ten championship game carrying over. I think Stanford underestimates them just a little bit.
I think it's going to be a really fun game to watch. I see a defensive battle. I don't see I like this guy.
What's happening?
Wisconsin football in about 2 hours.
Wisconsin football rules.
You know what? We should make him kiss a little bit right there. See,
No.
your guy and my guy. What's up?
That just happened, everyone.
This is live internet.
But anyway, what's you got for your prediction?
Oh, that's right. I'm still talking.
you still got
I see a very close game. I see a very tight defensive battle. I see 21-17 Stanford. I don't feel good saying that.
I'd say a lot of people would agree with you.
I know that's not a very original prediction. I'm not as bold, but I just don't know. Stanford's been playing lights out recently. That front seven, the fact that they put up 56 sacks, are out really blitzing all year. I think Kevin Hogan's playing out of his mind. I think you're going to see a lot of tricks from Wisconsin. I think you're going to see some big plays from Wisconsin. I don't know if they're going to have the offensive consistency to really get ahead. And unfortunately, I think they're going to lose another close Rose Bowl.
Well, at the end of the day, too. I mean, we're still in California. I'm not in Wisconsin.
Oh, this is freaking
great
awesome.
vacation.
So that's it for Bucky's Fifth Quarter. Thanks for joining us, you guys. I was Louis Bien with Bucky's Fifth Quarter, coming from Pasadena, California. Hope you guys enjoyed the game, and on Wisconsin.